Hey, everybody. I thought that on this 75th anniversary of D-Day, I would share with you a short story that I wrote about my father's jump and my experience with him and D-Day over the years. It was H minus 5, which meant 5 hours before the actual jump, the actual landing, that the paratroopers actually jumped into Normandy. So that said, I have the writing right here. I'm just going to grab it. Okay. And the name of this piece is, wait for it, D-Day. How could that be? Yeah. D-Day, June 6th, 1944. In 1993, I was working on 2 books at once. Both would later be published, but one I was struggling with. It was a young adult mystery, and my young heroine goes to visit her grandfather. I knew she needed to visit him, but I couldn't figure out what they were going to talk about. I was struggling with their dialogue when the phone rang. Papa's phone call interrupted my inability to write. What? I was crabby. Can I bring over lunch? He asked. Papa, I'm trying to work. Obviously irritated. Oh, okay, another time then. He hung up. I glanced at the calendar. It was June 6th. I phoned him back. Lunch would be great. He came to the door carrying our usual lunch, 2 Wendy's bacon cheeseburgers. He came to Los Angeles actually 2 years prior and stayed to be near me, his only daughter. Papa was 71, but he was ageless in his Singin' in the Rain show jacket. I got you a Sprite, he said as he placed the food on my kitchen table. My Basenji, purple, barely raised his head for the visit. Papa was a regular. We sat and ate. I told him about my frustration with my book and that I couldn't figure out what came next. He laughed. You figure it out. You always do. He threw his jacket on the back of his chair. Did the breakdowns come in? The breakdowns were the listing for acting jobs that go out to agents. Many actors in Hollywood get them to submit themselves for work. Papa had an agent, but had nabbed several jobs this way. He liked getting the breakdowns, and he said it made him feel more productive. In the early 1990s, the breakdowns were faxed, and since I had a fax machine, I got them daily for him. I'd often leave them in an envelope for him, and he'd pick them up down in a mailbox. Today, I slid the envelope across the table. Thanks, he said, taking a bite of his burger. Papa was the king of junk food, and whenever he was around, I ate it. I must admit that those damn bacon cheeseburgers from Wendy's tasted pretty good. How's your day going? He asked absent-mindedly as he glanced at the BDs. I told you, crappy. Papa finished his cheeseburger and rolled up the gold foil paper into a tight ball. He half smiled as he pushed the BDs away. Sorry you said that. Can I help? Yeah, write it for me. He pointed to my burger. Eat up, Shakespeare. You've got words to write. I nibbled on my burger. I'm depressed. I can't get it together. You know what today is? He asked. I knew. It was the anniversary of D-Day, the single most important day in military history, Papa said. We jumped at what was called H minus 5, which means it was 5 hours before the boys would storm the beaches. He told me the same story every year, but I'd actually never recalled hearing it in person. It had always been over the phone. As he spoke, his face changed to a man seeing the past before him. It was fairly quiet as we waited to board the planes. Some bravado, but mostly discomfort. We were, after all, loaded down with our equipment, ammunition, weapons, field equipment. I was Company B's friendly radio operator, and I was blessed with the additional burden of my radio. The damn thing weighed about 30 pounds. I silently ate my cheeseburgers, Papa chuckled. Ugh. And not to be overlooked, our gas masks. I left mine in the plane. Others left them after getting the ground. It made no sense to have them. We were behind enemy lines, in the middle of the crowds. They couldn't very well use gas without harming themselves. Oh, and in addition to the aforementioned equipment, I'd also had my first aid kit and my jump knife strapped to my leg. That knife came in pretty handy when I had to cut my way out of my tangled chute on the ground. That wasn't on D-Day, I corrected him. Wasn't that up in Market Garden? Didn't you land in a tree? He was always annoyed when I interrupted him. Yes, war expert. Do you want to hear this? Sure, go ahead. I took a sip of soda. He was gone again, back in a place that he couldn't believe he survived. You know, he said, the planes were deafening. You couldn't talk. We took off from England, and those flyboys just wanted to drop us and go back home. I can't blame them, really. It was dark and noisy. They were actually called sticks, and only about a dozen or so guys were in each plane. The planes were towing gliders as well. I was in a plane, so it was actually noisier. He paused as I finished my cheeseburger. Do you really want to hear this? Sure. Okay. So you could see cigarette embers in the plane, but actually that was about it. But as long as I live, I can still hear the command. Stand up! Hook up! He paused for emphasis, and I could see him hearing it. In that moment, I actually heard it too. Well, and then there was that order that was handed down right before the jump, and it changed my fate. What order? I asked, not recalling this part. Oh, Christ, you don't want to hear this. Please, Papa. I pleaded in that moment. I was fully involved, and I really didn't want him to stop. And as usual, when I pushed, he gave. All right, but then I got to get back to work. His hands fell on the breakdowns, and I remained silent. You know I was the radio operator. Well, the jump order, it was the lieutenant, me, and then the communications officer. But headquarters radioed down and said that we had to jump in rank order. That meant that the communications officer had to go after the Lou and then me. You following me? Uh-huh. Okay, so the lieutenant jumps, then the communications officer, and then I stepped in the door, and at that moment, I saw a tracer go right through him. What's a tracer? I asked. A bullet. The sky was lit up by tracers. What'd you do? I jumped. What happened to the communications officer? I told you, oh, for Christ's sakes, Tori, he was killed. Wait, Papa, so you watched him get killed and then jumped? Yeah, for Pete's sake, the guy was riddled with bullets. He was cut in half. Wow, so you jumped anyway? Of course I did. I had to. No, you didn't. You could have not gone. Of course I had to go. He was really getting irritated now, as if I just said the most preposterous thing imaginable, that someone would or could back out. He would always get irritable when he spoke of war, but this time I actually pushed him more. Papa, you chose to go. I'd have been court-martialed if I hadn't jumped. So you made the choice to go. Oh, for crying out loud, I told you I had to go. I kept driving the point home. He'd made a powerful choice, and I was determined that he see it. He finally just sighed. We had to go. We had to liberate people that needed our help. And I had a great deal of empathy for the Jews, and some guys didn't. Papa, no more. I've got things to do today, and I'm already going to relive the jump in my sleep tonight. I can just feel it coming. I just want to say it's pretty amazing that what you did. I wasn't alone, you know. I laughed. He leaned forward on the table. You know, that morning we had driven the Krauts out. From where? San Maria Glise. If you're curious, watch The Longest Day. It's actually the best film I've ever seen about D-Day. Red Skelton played John Steele. That's the guy who got caught on the steeple and the Nazis kept taking pot shots at him. He had an awkward smile in remembrance. I stood there on the ground and I watched as they cut Steele down from the staple, John Steele down from the steeple that morning. You know, I said aloud to no one in particular, this is the most important day in military history, and I'm here. Wow, that's cool. My words broke the momentum. Yeah, well, listen, it was all a long time ago, and I'm an old man now. When you're young, you don't think you'll die, and you don't care because you do what you think is right. Listen, better men than I were left behind in Normandy, believe me. Maybe, but you survived to tell the tale. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a small, tattered book of Shakespeare. I'd never actually seen the book that he read from every year. It was the famous speech that King Henry gives before the Battle of Agincourt, and it wouldn't be D-Day without it. Papa opened the small book, found the page he was looking for, cleared his throat to read. He that outlives this day and comes safe home, will stand a tiptoe when this day is named and rouse him at the name of Crispian. He that shall live this day and see old age will yearly on the vigil feast his friends and say, tomorrow is St. Crispian. That will he strip his sleeve and show his scars and say, these wounds I had on Crispin's day. Old men forget, yet all shall be forgot, but he'll remember with advantages. What feats he did that day, then shall our names, familiar in their mouths as household words, Harry the King, Bedford and Exeter, Warwick and Talbot, Salisbury and Gloucester, be in their flowing cups freshly remembered. This story shall the good man teach his son, and Crispian shall ne'er go by from this day to the ending of the world. But we in it shall be remembered. We few, we happy few, we band of brothers. For he today that sheds his blood with me shall be my brother, be he ne'er so vile. This day shall gentle his condition, and gentlemen in England now abed shall think themselves accursed they were not here, and hold their manhoods cheap, whiles any speaks that fought with us upon St. Crispian's day. Once again, Papa's voice transported me to a dramatic place beyond personal comprehension. The words struck me with such passion that I knew what I had to do with the book I was working on. I would use this speech in my Kara Cosgrove mystery, and that proved to be the missing element. In a dramatic sequence in my book, Kara's grandfather tells her about his experience on D-Day and reads from Shakespeare. My problem had been solved. Many years later, as I cleared out Papa's bookcase, darkness was descending upon his cold New York apartment, and it had begun to snow. I was packing his dusty books, separating my memories from his, and the box was almost filled when I found his tiny, tattered copy of Shakespeare wedged between two books. I began to place it in the box when I saw a makeshift bookmark and stopped. He'd used the old page from the breakdowns on that June day 9 years earlier to hold the place for the speech. I thought back to us at the table and the Wendy's bacon cheeseburgers. I thought about Papa living forever in history. I thought about how quickly a life passes, and I thought about how well he spent his. I hoped that I could be half the person Papa had been. You know, I think at times that we think that those we love are inconveniencing us greatly. Do you relate? That is my D-Day story, and I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly am very honored that I get to share a little piece of my history with you, and I will see you in the next one. In the meantime, I want to give profound thanks to those who have sacrificed for us, those who do service, those who jumped on D-Day, those who stormed the beaches, those who came back, and those who didn't. And I want to profoundly thank the families of our military who give so much and are so undervalued. Thank you for being of service as well, and for giving your time and your care to people like me and we never get to meet. Thank you very much for the service you all do. God bless.